Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Astro Alchemy. I'm Sarah, and I'm here with Lora, and we're your hosts for our weekly show where we discuss the gate that the sun is moving through currently from the human design perspective and also the gene key perspective, as well as touching on the astrology, the transits that are happening as we speak. Today actually happens to be the total lunar eclipse called a blood moon in Taurus. And so the astrology and the gene keys and the human design happen to all kind of converge in a really kind of incredible way. And so we're excited about this episode. I just want to say, as I usually do, if you like our content, if you're interested in human design, astrology, the gene keys, and you want to hear more, and you're on our fractal, we resonate, the things that we say make sense to you, please like and subscribe, and we will be very grateful for you. We've had a bunch of new subscribers, so just want to say hello to all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of our conversation. And please comment if you have any questions or any additional material that you want to share with us. Other than that, it's Tuesday, November 8th. It is 7:19 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4:19 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I think that is everything for the intro. Lora, is there anything that you want to add?
There was before earlier today, but I've calmed down, so I won't trouble you guys. I was feeling the urge, the projector urge, if you're a projector, to guide someone, and so I wanted to offer services here, but I no longer have that urge, so don't bother me with wanting guidance or advice. But other than that, no, I think we're good. Okay. But if you do want guidance or advice, you can check out Sarah's Instagram, Third Eye Kiss, or mine, and somewhere down below, and follow us and have a conversation there if you want, or not, whichever.
Yeah, if it's correct for you. And yeah, I mean, obviously we like giving advice here, not unsolicited necessarily, hopefully, if you're listening to this, but yeah, we have energy capability, or energy guidance capabilities. So there it is. Do you want to share the human design chart of the moment?
Blinked for a second. On that note, let's move on to the human design chart. So, like Sarah said, today is the day of the total lunar eclipse. So if you look at these little numbers on the side, top number is the sun in gate 1, Earth in gate 2, North node in gate 2, South node in gate 1. The moon was in gate 2, now it's in gate 23. Mercury is also in gate 1 because we had a Mercury Cazimi. Down here, Uranus is in gate 2. Lots of 1s and 2s, which are right here located in the G center. I said the moon's currently in 23, so this transit between 43 and 23 is temporary, just for today. So by the time you're probably listening to this, it shall be gone. 43 is defined by who right now? By Venus. So Venus and the moon are creating a channel together in 43-23. But for the most part, we have gates 1 and 2 in the G center, super duper active, though in an undefined G center. There's Saturn and Jupiter here too, Saturn in 13, Jupiter in 25. But currently, as we're talking, we're in the 4th line of the sun being in. I was forget, what am I doing here? My brain, again, had another brain fart. Oh my goodness. Let's talk about gate 1. Let's ground ourselves and stop getting distracted. Yeah, like I said, the sun's in line 4, but I'll get more to that later. Line 1, from the human design perspective, it's the first hexagram of the I Ching. It's the first gate, first gene key. 2 is the second one, obviously. 1 is 6 yang lines, 2 is 6 yin lines, and they're opposite one another in the polarity, where they're sitting across from each other in Taurus and Scorpio. Obviously, Taurus lunar eclipse. So Earth is in Taurus, Sun's in Scorpio right now. But yeah, polar opposites in the sense that one is very yang, the other is very yin. And they're both in the same circuit. So it's individual circuitry running through the center. It's the knowing individual circuit. And 1 is part of this channel, 1 and 8, going up towards the throat, which is the channel of inspiration. It's an energy of contribution, wanting to make a contribution, because they're situated here in this like area. They're pento channels. Pentic, I don't think that's an appropriate adjective that's been used before, but I'll just use it now. It's a pentachannel, so I'm going to call it pentic. To also part of this penta energy, because these 3 channels and these 3 channels. So if you're listening on Spotify, hello Spotify. The ones I'm referring to are the channels in between the sacral through the G to the throat. So 31-7, 8-1, 33-13, 15-5, 2-14, and 46-29. 2 is where the magnetic monopole lives, and it's again in the G center, reaching down towards the sacral center. 2-14, that's channel of the beat. Whereas 8-1 wants to make a contribution, 2-14 has the ability to provide resources, and it deals with serendipity to a certain extent. I feel like all of the G deals with serendipity to a certain extent, but 2 is the ultimate feminine versus 1, the ultimate young masculine. What else is there? Because they're individual, they're deeply melancholic. I think that's a very heavy theme when we'll get into the gene keys. Deeply melancholic and creative gates. What is there to say? What else? Am I missing something, Sarah? I feel like there's something major that's not
a couple things. I mean, I think that it would be helpful, 1, to just touch on the line that we're in right now. If you want to zoom out a little bit. And then secondly, I think it would be good for us to touch on the 1.3 and the 2.3.
Yeah. Okay, so for now, gate 1, the creative. Creation as a primal force, the energy potential to manifest inspiration without limitation. The gate of unique self-expression. We're in the 4th line, so line 4, aloneness as the maximum, not this maximum, aloneness as the medium for creativity. The tension of inner light. Earth in exaltation, the earth exalted as a symbol of personal perspective manifested outside of influence, where the potential magic of inspiration is diluted, creativity that must develop outside of influence. Jupiter in detriment, where the potential magic of inspiration is diluted, the need to influence that abandons aloneness and limits creativity. That's that. Well, here's 2.4, just for reference, why not? 2 is receptivity as the primal base through which any response is determined, the root of action. Secretiveness for line 4, more than modesty, the ability to preserve harmony through discretion. Venus exalted, the higher goal transcends personal acclaim. The team player acknowledged as the leader but never the captain, where higher knowing does not have to be expressed to be recognized. That was a hit to the ego today. Mars in detriment. Loose lips sink ships. The unquenchable fire of the ego engenders enmity, the inability to keep silent when the opportunity arises for expression. Ooh, these are poem lines today. Those are 1.4 and 2.4. Here we have 1.3, and we'll hear all the lines if you want to read them if you're on YouTube with us. But 1.3 is the energy to sustain creative work. Mars exalted as a symbol of profound.
Well, and let me just, sorry to interrupt. As you know, I don't like to do that, but so this is the 1.3, and this is where the sun was for the eclipse that that happened today. So if you want to go ahead and read it, I just wanted to make sure that I reiterated that.
Thank you for clarifying. Which I think, I don't remember what time, was it like at 3 a.m. Pacific, 6 a.m.
Yes,
Eastern?
exactly right. It was right around 3 a.m. Pacific, 6 a.m. Eastern. So we're about 12 hours off of it.
Okay. Mars exalted as a symbol of the profound need for self-expression, the deep need for self-expression. Earth in detriment. Material forces can disrupt creativity and lead to over-ambition. Materialism disrupts creativity. Very repetitive, but that's okay. Not that repetitive, but the second half is like repeating the first half. Anyways, 2.3, patience. The teacher that never stops being a student. Jupiter in exaltation, dedication to a lifetime of receptivity with the maturity to accept that the process never ends. When connected permanently to gate 14 through the B channel, rewards for services rendered. The recognition that receptivity is a lifelong process. Uranus in detriment for the revolutionary, patience is a vice, higher knowing that cannot wait and demands expression. I looked at the line companion for this particular gate or line 3, patience, and Ra Ruhu goes into explaining how Uranus here, it can feel like the trial and error of line 3 has its trials and tribulations. It bumps into things, and so you get into one direction and then all of a sudden, no life changes, feel like, gotta go in a different direction. And so it's kind of that frustration, that annoyance, like, have to change direction again, have to change direction again. And so patience then becomes a vice, because Uranus doesn't want to deal with shifting gears over and over and over again in this particular position. Or it can just be like, all hell breaks loose and you just go in all the different directions willy-nilly. So it has kind of those two sides to it, but that is 2.3. Let's switch on back.
And that 2.3 is where the moon was for the eclipse.
And I bring up Uranus because Uranus is currently in 2.4, but when you have a planet conjunct within the same gate as another, and one of those planets might pull that planet into detriment or exaltation, it will do so. So even though the moon was in 2.3 with the lunar eclipse and Uranus was in 2.4, the particular gate can be pulled up or down based on the planet that is there. It's not like astrology where you have a rigidity to which planet does well in each sign. Like Mars is happy in Capricorn and Mars is upset in, I don't know, Cancer. With each particular gate, there in that particular line within each gate, there is a planet that will pull it up or pull it down. So with 2.3, regardless that it's the moon, Uranus pulls it down, and because Uranus is also into it, pulls it down into detriment, just for educational purposes. But anyways, back to wanting to and like what's going on. I don't know, it just personally, it's been an overwhelming eclipse. Part of that, I think, is because this eclipse is with the North Node versus the eclipse we had 2 weeks ago was with just the South Node. It was a new moon solar eclipse, so we were just circling around Sun, Moon, and Ketu were together, and Scorpio versus this one, the North Node Rahu is in Taurus, and so the Moon and Uranus are activating Rahu, which is, if you go back a couple episodes, you'll listen to the mythology, the roughshod mythology that I expressed about Rahu and Ketu. But Rahu is very hungry. It just wants. It wants experiences. It wants life. Very materialistic, but it can be a great thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a lot. It's hungry, and so that hunger is within us, pulling us into this really intense energy. For me, I was telling Sarah, it feels like there was ants in my pants. Like there is just so much, I want to say it's entropy, like the gene key, this potential for energy, that the energy wanted to get expressed, whatever it was with 1.3, I think, like that. Ooh, where'd it go? Here it is. That going up. Mars exalted as the profound need for self-expression. Like I wanted to express myself. I wanted to guide someone, and I guide Sarah all the time, but that's lost its novelty. So it's like, I need something new. I need something exciting. Give me someone, universe. And it just wasn't happening. And I bring universe because it's a potent piece of this little puzzle. We discussed it last week, but the magnetic monopole, which is the driver of the vehicle, lives in gate 2. And so our direction in life, our geometry, birth to death, like that whole path that we live, the entire life, is kind of held together by both the nodes and magnetic monopole. The nodes are the agents and the workers of the magnetic monopole. And so there's this universe doing its thing where the mind wants to take over and make things happen, but it's not the responsibility of the mind to do so. The driver has control, and we just got to surrender. So lots of energy of surrender. But I feel like I'm not doing a great job of like explaining gate 1. gate one's like pure creative energy. If you think about the differences between yang and yin, yang is light. It is just light, clarity, all that stuff, versus two, yin is form. It deals with like matter, the material plane, everything that has form. And so in that, light has potential, right? Light can change, it can move, it can free itself, versus form has its rigidity to it, which like you wouldn't necessarily think about masculine and feminine energy, but because it's form, it's already materialized. It's hard to transform a material object with any sort of chemical reaction because it's already so dense, it's already so solid. So it has this stability to it, versus one can kind of go anywhere and it's a bit wild. But I feel like that's more getting into the gene key energy of it. Sarah, is there anything else? I feel like
well,
have eclipse brain.
just to piggyback on some of the things you said, for the one, because this was a lunar eclipse, I just want to take a second to think about the moon and what you were talking about before with Uranus. I think it's very interesting, within the line 3, this quality of as a receptive person being able, the quality of, if you have this gate, right, or if it's activated for you, this deep ability to change, or to allow the energy of life to kind of move you where it will. And then, having Uranus there, and it's also it's going to be hard for me to not blend the astrology here, but the moon traditionally is exalted in Taurus, and what is Taurus like? It likes this sensuous continuity, this security, this quality of kind of like just feeling grounded in the material plane. And Uranus is kind of like, okay, like you're grounded in the material plane, except you need to change really quick, or you need to stop changing really quick, right? And so there was kind of this, I don't want to say discomfort, but it feels like there's a tension that the eclipse brought up for us in human design between like the magnetic monopole and the ego in a very strong way that was almost impossible to avoid or ignore, because the moon doesn't necessarily, it doesn't represent the ego, but there is a quality to it that can be more egoic or can be more not self because it's so changing. But at the same time, we're kind of looking at it from, again, like all of the conversations that we've had in the past about eclipses and what they mean, and the nodes of the moon, like this structural instability that's necessary and isn't inherently something that feels good. But maybe potentially, depending on, whatever is coming up for each person, it's something that needs to be looked at. And, with Uranus in detriment in the 2.3, there's the quality of, like you mentioned before too, from the line companion, it's like either wanting to change really rapidly, too quickly, going faster than the magnetic monopole wants to, or wanting to hold on to things too much. And so just thinking about that and where those things or those themes might be showing up, I think is a useful exercise. As far as the one goes, yeah, I mean, the 1.3 is one of the most, I don't want to say that, I don't think Ross said it was like one of the best places for the one, but with Mars in exaltation in this line, there's this just huge ability to shift your creativity, like the creative urge whenever you're supposed to. So it's like constantly, we know what 3 lines do because we've talked about it a lot. Obviously me and Lora know, but maybe you guys also know, whoever's listening to this, if you listen, there's this quality of trial and error and changing behavior in order to get closer to what is correct. And so there's kind of, with the one as the creative, Mars really has a lot to do with the 1.3 specifically. And so I'm just thinking about this wanting to move, this energy that the sun is giving to move and to expand and to shift and to grow or change, where the 2 is kind of like dealing with, okay, like I guess I'm gonna have to change some of this energy, even though I'm used to staying the same, at least on the one side of it. So like I said, hard for me to not blend everything. But yeah, these are, within the magnetic monopole, with the 2, but just with the G center, generally speaking, having to do with like how we are able to or how we're able to let the driver take the wheel of our lives and take us where we need to be, instead of being in this egoic state of trying to be the driver, our personality is trying to be the driver. And yeah, I think that's probably enough for my little tangent around human design.
Well, you brought up the eclipse, and I want to talk about the eclipse. We can wait until we get like into the astrological chart, or at least I'll wait. To prepare for this episode, I was Googling a lot of random things like cosmology, like understanding the I cannot speak. The magnetic monopole, like as you know, well, I bring up, you don't necessarily know, but I've been bringing up brave cosmology, which is like the creation story of the world from human design side. And it talks about like where the magnetic monopole came from for each of us, and like what it actually really means, not in the practical sense of like it's driving your vehicle, but it's the magnetic monopole and the design crystal. When they're together, they don't have form. When they're separate, we have form, and form forms, which is like, when we talk about, you have your design side and your personality side. Your design crystal enters your body at conception. And so it enters into your form, and in that it separates, like it has to separate from its own magnetic monopole. They're not always paired, but they have a little buddy. But our design crystal and our magnetic monopole for this life is subject to this particular life, versus like your personality crystal is eternal. That you take, oh gosh, words, that you take every life wherever you go when you die. But for your physical form right now, like what stays on earth after you die and what then, disintegrates your body, that's based on the design crystal and the magnetic monopole. But before they entered in your body, they were one. And it's in entering into form, or in their separation, that form begins. And that source of like, your original design crystal, or not your original, but like the design crystal that you are, the magnetic monopole that you are, they came from the original source of the Big Bang. And just like with that, there is an original magnetic monopole that then fragmented into all the individual unique magnetic monopoles for all of us. But that originated, and it was like, that is love, and that is eternal oneness. And then in that separation is the disconnect from knowing that we are love. And so we're no longer love, but we are the expression of love. But we're no longer love because we're no longer connected as one. Once we have form, we are then the expression of love and not love itself. And so with this like heavy magnetic monopole energy, with this heavy G center energy, there's this big quest to find love and to find a sense of direction, to find a sense of purpose, to find that sense of beingness within ourselves that feels fulfilling for our existence. I feel like this stems from the previous eclipses energy, like when we were in the energy of 28, which is like, what's our purpose? The G center also deals with purpose. And so if you're feeling the internal disruption, like wanting to find your purpose, wanting to find love, know that it's within you. It's just, you're in the illusion of separateness, one, but it's disconnected. And when you'll die, you'll be happy again. That's very morbid. Don't listen to me. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this gate. I feel like there was. I feel like I mentally prepared. And when we got on camera, my brain turned to mush, but that's okay. Right-mindedness, you get what you get because it's what you're supposed to get. And so like, I don't have to try to prove anything with what I'm saying. It's great. I'll talk about Uranus later. I wanted to talk about Uranus, but I'll wait. Do you want to hop into Gene Keys for now?
Yeah, let's hop into the gene keys. And I'm feeling the same way as you. I'm gonna blame it on the eclipse, but very mushy brain today, which is like so annoying. And it's probably because I've overindulged in information about the eclipse. And so like there's too much information in my head. And like there's a cap that I wasn't aware of, but yeah, I think that talking about the gene keys would be good to to continue moving us along.
For gene key 1, we have the shadow of entropy. Also something that I was like, what is entropy? Where does entropy come from? Does the sun experience entropy? How does the sun's fusion relate to entropy? Then that got me into the end of the universe weird videos on YouTube, and that's what got me into cosmology. There's a reason I looked up cosmology again today. It's because of this particular gene key. Anyways, we have the shadow of entropy, the gift of freshness, and the city of beauty. The two sides to the shadow, the repressive side is depressive, the reactive side is frenetic. Hello, feeling a little Miss Frenetic today. The programming partner obviously is gene key 2, with the shadow of feeling dislocated or disoriented, the gift of orientation, and the city of unity. Like I said earlier, gene key 1's part of this channel of inspiration with 1 and 8, but its code on ring is the code on ring of fire with 14. And then the code on ring of water, fire and water, haha, is 2 and 8. The other two little partners of these two channels with, 2 being part of the channel of the beat. Anything else here? From entropy to syntropy, the creative is the gene key, the hexagram, the I Ching, there we go, the I Ching name for heaven over heaven, 6 young lines. I don't know what it is for number 2, but we'll get there eventually. This energy of entropy. Again, what is entropy? Like before we get into the symbolism of everything, let's see if my brain can remember. It's this idea that heat will go from something that's hotter to something that's colder, and it can't go back. Once it goes from hotter to colder, like that's it. It finds that sort of equilibrium and like the dispersion of heat, but you need to force it to go back the other way. It won't go back on its own. And yet there's this continual movement of it going from heat to cold, regardless of what the situation is. If you have something that's hotter and something's colder and they touch, the energy is going to move. But the entropy is this potentiality of the energy to enter chaos. You have a closed container with the heat trapped inside, with the energy trapped inside. And if you open that container up, that energy will, within the first container, it's nice and orderly, perceived to be orderly. And when you open up the container, the movement is disruptive and it's chaotic. And so the chaos can only increase before it, or forever and ever, it can't ever go back to the order. So hot and cold being the order and the chaos that Richard Rudd talks about in this gene key, because I had to look up the science. But anyways, the shadow of entropy for ourselves and our own emotional little bodies is this idea that we have melancholy, like we have this deep, depressive, icky feeling of ants in our pants, this chaos inside of us that wants to become something. It's the pure young energy of creation. It's this creative root, this source of energy, and it wants to be expressed within ourselves. And if we don't have the right outlet, then it's going to become chaotic. But when it's a mutation, there we go, something else that's part of individual circuitry. It works on a pulse and it mutates. It's not constant. So like imagine that things are stagnant and icky. All of a sudden there will be a spark and there will be a chemical mutation. Richard Rudd talks about this in his chapter in his book, that there is a chemical process at play with individual circuitry. And you can't force it. Like if you're trying to understand why you're feeling icky or melancholic, why you're feeling ants in your pants, then you're only going to add to the chaos, and it's not actually going to bring the natural chemical process of resolve, of freshness, of new idea, of creative potential, becoming something, becoming beauty, because you're just going to perpetuate my favorite words, ickiness. You're going to perpetuate the ickiness, and it's not going to get anywhere if you continue to think about it or try to manipulate it in any way, shape, or form. it mutates on its own, it becomes on its own, because it's yang energy. But I have quotes. I'll talk about the quotes or read the quotes. If we learn anything from these two primary gene keys, it is about the nature of duality itself, which is that life cannot exist without polarity. The entire notion that the spectrum of consciousness at the heart of the gene keys revelation depends upon this polarity of the shadow at one end of at one end of the spectrum, and the city at the other. Each gives birth to the other. So in this ultimate youngness, what's natural is the ultimate yinness. And so the one and the two kind of set the foundation for the entire gene keys or the entire I Ching of this energy of polarity. You have your yang lines and your yin lines. And then for the gene keys, it becomes the very gesticulating today. That's not a word. Gesticulative today. I'll try to stop. Sorry if I'm distracting you, but it creates the journey from shadow to city with this energy of polarity. That's the first quote. I think I have multiple ones. What is the meaning then of entropy in your life? As was just mentioned, entropy manifests in human beings as numbness. That's the main shadow, the victim of numbness, the dilemma that the number one experiences. Numbness, and this numbness is actually an extremely fertile state of awareness. First of all, you have to understand that it is a chemical state, and secondly, it becomes suddenly and accepted and fully embraced. It passes just as suddenly. Entropy and creativity are an eternal dance played out within the universe we inhabit. The first shadow appears in your life whenever you feel flat or sad or low. It's a chemical process. I like the chemical quotes. It's a chemical process the body enters into. And if you try to comprehend it, find a reason for it, or worst of all, try to fix it, then the natural process will not complete itself cleanly. If you resist this state mentally, one of the great dangers is that you will interfere with its process and fix it inside of yourself as depression, because the first shadow triggers the chemical processes that can lead to depression. Most depressive states are the result of resisting certain shadow frequencies within our genetic makeup. Depending on your individual genetic predispositions, you may be more or less prone to feeling low than others. Generally speaking, the more creative the person you are, the more deeply you are affected by this kind of melancholic chemistry. I think is this next quote also about the shadow? I really like the shadow. I think that's it. I think that's into the next whole chapter. I feel like those are my thoughts. Sarah, what would you like to contribute to this gene key?
Oh man, I feel like I have so much, because I feel like everything, it's so interesting for me when, like, before I read the chapter, before I look at the energy, like the things that show up in my life are so in alignment with it. And then once I see what it is, I go back and I say, wow, okay, like a lot of this stuff makes sense. I recently shared a quote or a little video online by a doctor named Gabor Mate, which go check him out if you're interested. And he was talking about how the most creative people are also the most sensitive, but they're also the most likely to be attempting to numb themselves, because there is this relationship between creativity and deep sensitivity. And so I think that speaks to part of the shadow, and something else, because I feel like this key in particular actually can give us a lot of tips in order to work with depression if we've had it. For me, I am, and I think it's actually also useful. Do you mind minimizing this actually? I think it's actually also useful to look at where your rising or ascendant sign, the degree of it falls, because for me personally, I'm thinking, like, why do I relate so much to this key, to this gate? And it's not in my human design chart, but it is, alas, in my astrology chart. And my my rising sign falls in the 1.2. And so as we're going through the 1 with the sun there, Mercury, Venus there as well, I'm having all of these watershed moments around my own creative process and what that looks like. And most of my life, what I've attempted to do is avoid, numb, suppress, push away the feelings of depression, the feelings of numbness, to label them as wrong, to say, this is not how I'm supposed to feel. Like, what happened to my creativity? what happened to the spark that I had, what happened to the thing that felt like, so many people wanted to gather around my fire when I was feeling really good, and now I'm feeling terrible and nobody wants to. And it's like when we start to judge as the time when we're feeling creative as bad versus the time that we're feeling really creative as good versus the time that we're feeling depressed as bad, we completely negate the fact that it's part of a greater cycle. And we actually fix the depression further in us. The depression, whether it be a more longer form instance or something that's kind of brief and passing, is a really, really useful tool. And if we don't use it and sink into it and allow it to work its alchemy on us, allow it to tenderize us in a sense, allow it to do whatever it needs to do, like we can, again, get stuck in it, and we may not be able to get back to the kind of creative upswing that's inherently a part of the cycle of creativity. It goes, you're creative, and creativity can take on many different forms. It's not just creativity in the sense of I'm going to go draw. It's like, however you're creative, if you're creative through talking, if you're creative through walking, if you're creative through roller skating, however it is, there's times where we have a lot of energy for those ventures, and there's times where we don't, and we have to respect the ebb and the flow. And mostly in modern Western medicine, we basically completely suppress our depressive tendencies in favor of our creative tendencies, and it actually disengages us from living even more deeply creative lives. And so I think that this key can actually give us a lot of insight into the nature of depression in general, and like gives us insight into, whether or not, it's correct, because it's pathologized in Western medicine. There's something wrong with depression, but in reality, it's natural. It's as natural as being up or being excited. So that was one thing I wanted to say on that. And the depression just seems to be something that I have specifically, more so than the freneticness, although there's moments for that, that I've experienced, and it doesn't feel very young, you know what I mean, when you're depressed. It feels very, very deeply yin, but really that's only because you're sinking into it, and that the energy is kind of, it's stuck. And there's a lot of energy, but it's stuck. And the stuckness kind of feeds into the fear, and the fear feeds into the depression. So that's what I wanted to say for the shadow. Did you have anything else for the gift, or did you want to touch on the gift?
Yeah, it's the gift of freshness. I don't think I took any quotes for the gift. I thought I did, but I didn't see them saved in my ebook, because I just skip ahead to beauty. So I guess I don't, but I think the idea of freshness is that when you let the energy to permeate and simmer and then go through its meditative process, you get a new outlook, you get a new fresh way of seeing things, and it's not that heavy, sticky energy anymore. It's bright and it's refreshing. Maybe you want to talk about the one,
Yeah.
like if the throat energy, like the one wants to externalize itself, right? It's like connected to the throat. It wants to get out to the 8, to be seen, to be heard, to make a contribution, versus the 2 is connected to our sacral, which is our energy source. So it's like really interesting to think about, like this one being yang, like you said, it's like creative. And yet so often we associate creativity with femininity. And yet it is this very masculine, pure energy of potential, rather than like the receptivity and the form of the 2. So anyways, you can go ahead and talk about freshness.
Well, something that I really like that Richard Rudd said in the chapter is just that basically that the 2, the feminine principle, the fully yin, it is directing the energy. It is responsible for directing, whereas the 1 is giving the thrust, to the gas, to get the energy going where it needs to go. So it's like there's this quality where the feminine is actually, and we'll talk about it when we touch on the 2, is actually in charge, just to kind of circle back to the beginning of the chapter. freshness is so interesting. Like, and again, just very important, I think, more so than I realized, to look at where the gate and everything that your rising sign in astrology falls into. Because it, because again, I've been relating very strongly to this, but I was just talking before about how when you're in the creative flow, when you're in the creative energy, there's this quality that you feel like people are coming around to really warm up around your light. That's something that's the freshness. It's this quality of it's almost like this quality of warmth that people want to, that they're attracted to. And I've always felt that, but just as easily, and the quality of the one can also energize whatever it has around it. So it's like it's pushing all of this fresh energy into maybe what once was stagnant. And just as quickly when the one goes down on its wave, not an emotional wave, but when it goes into the melancholy, it can also de-energize. It can take energy away from the container that it's in, which it seems this is kind of having to do with the power that it holds, I think, just with all of the yang energy. He says that for someone with a one, life is either fully engaged or fully at rest when he's talking about freshness. And I think it's important to just note, because again, like, when we have to respect the cycles of life, we have to respect the energy direction that the two, right, this other half of the puzzle for our eclipse, and these are obviously programming partners. Or wait, is that not the right? Okay, they're obviously programming partners. Okay, brain. He talks about how, the two is the one that's guiding the direction of the energy. And it's like, if the energy is saying you need to rest, you respect it, because otherwise you may drain the energy from the places that you are. If you kind of need the time to go in to yourself, in order to respect the time that it's time to go out of yourself and offer that freshness to the rest of your community, your fractal, your world. So that's kind of more for me on the personal level. So, but I do think that's all I wanted to say for the one. And actually, I don't have anything from the city. So if you want to finish up.
Apparently, I highlighted the book before I read it recently. So like I have old quotes highlighted, so we'll see what they are. But true beauty is emptiness. There is no one to comprehend and nothing to feel it. It simply does not exist. And this is its paradox. It is not true beauty if it can be spoken of, copied, or shared. It is unique and inexplicable. Beauty is the expression of unity in human form. At a lower frequency, we can only comprehend beauty through light or sound, whether that be a beautiful face, a sunrise, or a piece of music. Our notion of beauty is always rooted in the presence of something rather than in its absence. True beauty has a greater connection to absence, to darkness, or silence. But even these words cannot approach it, being rooted as they are in the world of duality, language, and opposites. I feel like this city reminded me of, the core of the magnetic monopole, what I was saying earlier, how like before everything, broke apart and matter became matter, and when it was all very, very dense and tightly wound up, there is this beauty, like there is nothing, and yet within it, it's just pure oneness, just unconditional love, pure beauty. And then as everything broke apart and we gained our sense of self, we gain that, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but all of a sudden it has this bias on it that judges and that compares. And I feel like true beauty, this true energy of the one, is like there is no comparison. Everything is beautiful, everything is equal, and everything is perfect in and of itself. And it's finding the beauty, not even finding the beauty in everything, because just like this quote says, once you look at it, it's no longer the true city, because you have to be without it. In the beginning of the chapter, Richard Red shares a story of a young man, I think, by the river or something, and he comes across a turtle and he asks the turtle, like, what's it all about then? And then the turtle just ignores him, and then he goes into the astral plane or whatever and disconnects from reality. And so it's that complete disconnection from form, from identity, which is fascinating because this gene key is in the center of identity, of knowing who you are, but who you are is, it doesn't matter because it's all part of the same oneness that's like just eternally beautiful. I don't know, it's very, like Richard Rudd said, it's very paradoxical, but I really like it. In beauty, nothing lies outside the unity of everything. Everything is experienced as a unique creative expression of this unity. I feel like unity might be a better word, but that's okay. You will recall that the foundation of this first key at the shadow frequency in the field of words. You will recall that the foundation of this first gene key at the shadow frequency is the field of entropy, in which energy ceaselessly moves from order to chaos. Well, at the acidic level of the frequency, where frequency itself is obliterated and transcended, we find ourselves in an eternal field of syntropy. Syntropy refers to the movement of energy within infinite dimensions, all imbued with consciousness, all united by order and love. Like that's, returning to the oneness that eventually we'll get to when the inner divine fire is released through your DNA, you become capable of miraculous power. I think that's it. What's this next quote? Is this the next gene key? I'm not sure. I'll ignore that next quote. I think it is. But yeah, those are my notes on beauty. It just feels so encompassing for part of the whole. It's like 28 was human glue on my end, and here I am in like 1, and everything's like all magical and beautiful and wonderful and rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. It's very, very contradictory, like this movement. Oh, I remembered something I wanted to talk to, which Sarah mentioned to me on our side of conversations, that we're now in the quarter of mutation. 1 is the very first gene key or gate of the quarter of mutation. And mutation deals with our lovely friend death and dying and the process of leaving this world. And it's not even a figurative death of like you have an experience and then you are a butterfly and you transform and you're a new person. It's like actual dying. It's very intense, this quarter of mutation. And people who are born in this quarter are here to contemplate and experience true death and what it means to die. Anyways, this first gene key is part of the Hades godhead. And Sarah and I have been starting to look at the godheads, and Hades deals with the distraction of death. It's like this idea that we're here for genetic imperatives. We're here to reproduce and, populate the earth with the human race. And then after that point, the program doesn't have a purpose for us anymore. Like this is the program's reason for why we're here. And like the neutrino stream is part of the program. It's the matrix. And so like there's this underlying, not an energy, but this underlying framework, the matrix that we're in. And it just wants us to, be self-aware and populate, and then that's it. And then after that point, we're like left to our own devices. Like, okay, what do you do now? And within all the godheads, we find distractions of like what we get into in the matrix to think that we have some semblance of purpose. And Hades is about, feeling like you can be immortal with leaving an imprint, leaving a legacy, leaving something behind you after you die. So you'll be forever remembered and have like this imprint on earth, your carbon footprint of who you were and what you did. And it's this a false pursuit of this like quote unquote immortality that distracts you from like actually continuing to live your life and find your own purpose outside of the program's purpose for you. So there's this, even though, purposelessness was back in 28, there's still this theme of finding purpose through life and through death with this quarter of mutation. So things to think about. I don't know if you have anything else to add about it, Sarah.
I do actually, something that I forgot about. I'm glad you mentioned the quarter of mutation because we moved out of the quarter of duality, which is what we were in, which is really about, basically like the balancing of relationships in a sense. And whereas the mutation is now where things start to, I think if we think about it, even in like a broader stroke perspective, it's like we're actually able to like mutate energy and change. Whereas the quarter of initiation has to do with the mind, the quarter of civilization has to do with like rooting the things that come from the mind into the material. And then the quarter of duality has to do with this relational quality. And if we think about everything as a circle, because that's really what's happening annually, the sun, everything's circling around everything. the quarter of mutation has to do with the way that things change, things die in order for new things to come about. And so it's, a really fertile time for, not just like technical physical death, but also death of everything that it's time to die, whether it be belief systems, ideas, relationships, anything that can die, that needs to die, needs to go in order for something new to come around. The other thing that I wanted to say, which is about the 1.3 actually, which again is where the sun is for this total lunar eclipse, full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus. The sun is obviously opposite it. With the 1.3, it has to do with, there's this quality of needing to create for the essential nature of creativity. And Mars is exalted here, like I mentioned before, but the Earth is in detriment, because what ends up happening for people who are creative, for people who have the 1.3, is that instead of just being satisfied with their inherent creativity, they end up wanting to sell it. And as soon as and because this is an individual channel, it really shouldn't be interfered, or I'm sorry, an individual gate, it really shouldn't be interfered with. And so when you're trying to sell something, of course, there's the concept of marketing, and all of these types of things come along, where you're not just being creative just for the sake of creativity. There's an end result that you're trying to work for, and it undermines the entirety of the creative process. And so there's something to be said about that quality of like needing to create for the simple reason of creating. It's something that I've struggled with my whole life, of not doing it so that I can get a specific response around and out of other people, or doing it because other people are going to accept it or acknowledge it. Because I'm not sure if it's Richard Rudd or Rob, but ultimately, like, most of the most unique, creative, individual acts are never going to be acknowledged by people in the lifetime of the person that created them. And so there's no reason to care really what people think. Only time is really the true judge if something unique and individualistic and fresh really came out. And that's what's going to be the test. And you may never ever live to see it. And there's going to be so much like kind of like creativity that was, I don't want to say false, but implemented because of your need to be seen or acknowledged, approved, all of those things. It's just going to fall and die, and no one's going to ever remember it. And so it feels good in the moment to get the acknowledgement. It feels good in the moment to get the $100 for your work of art, but that's not actually the highest form, the Siddhic form, the exalted form of this line. And then it just brings me back to the 1.2, which is where my rising is, obviously opposite the 2.2. The 1.2 is unique and individualistic, but it can't see that in itself. And so it comes, and it's because, again, it's not for it to see what it can do. It's just for it to act, to assert, to push the energy forward. Whereas the opposite line, the 2.2, is called the natural, right? So this 2 is what we're about to talk about, where it just knows how to move, and it knows that it knows how to move in a sense. The 1 is unaware of itself because it's just a pure creative force. And as soon as it becomes aware of itself, it kind of melts in on itself. It's like it doesn't work anymore. So I thought that was just an interesting concept around the 1, and especially in comparison to the key that we're about to talk about, where, like I've mentioned many times, is where the moon and also Uranus has been for our total lunar eclipse.
To piggyback before we open it, Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a book about all this. Go check out her book about creativity and wanting to make money from it. But it's part of this same column, right? 214 is about materialism to a certain extent, but 1 isn't. 1 just wants to get to the throat. And on that, 1.8 is a projected channel. 214 is a generative channel. They're different in their nature. So it's also something to note. Another thing is the second line can't see itself because that's its nature. It has to be projected on from the outside. So even though 2.2 is a natural, it still has to be called out. There's a calling out quality for all second lines that is integrative to how they function mechanically. I feel like there's something else, but I can't remember it. So let's just share our screen again and move on to gene key number 2. Right click. There we go. Dislocation, orientation, and unity. Feeling lost or regimented are the 2 shadow frequencies. Returning to the 1, code energy of water. The receptive with 6 Ian lines, which is earth over earth. Again, this is where the magnetic monopole lives. So it completely deals with, I remember my other thing, completely deals with our sense of direction. Last week, I mentioned that there's this relationship between gate 2 and its incarnation cross, for the most part, the squares that it forms with 7, 13, and 1. 1 is a roll gate. Like there are 6 roll gates within the human design system: 7, 1, 13, 10, 59, and 27. And I wish I memorized all the archetypes associated with each roll gate, but I don't know which one comes from which. I know them for 13 and I know them for some of them, but not like if you look at your human design profile and you're like, oh, I'm a hermit opportunist. Those words come from gate 10. Pretty sure, don't quote me, but line 1 has these qualities to it, and it's not the general for line 5. I'm trying to like figure out which is which. Anyways, look at line 1, and not line 1, but gate 1 and all the lines in more detail, because a lot of the nature of what it means to be every person and like how we operate, the role that we wear in the world around us, the character that we have, it deals with 1 primarily, and like these other gates that I mentioned. But last week I mentioned with gate 2, it has this relationship with 7, 1, and 13. 2 is the driver of the vehicle, and it kind of have different perspectives of the world around it as it's driving the vehicle. 1 is the steering wheel, like what's directly in front of it, what's the present moment. 7 is the windshield that's looking through the future. 13 is the rear view mirror that's looking at the past. So like there's this relationship between all these gates here, but 2 is the driver of the vehicle. It's in charge of your life. 8 is not a consciousness crystal. You have 2 of those, your personality crystal and your design crystal. The magnetic monopole, which dictates what's correct for you and leads you through your life. I mean, it doesn't dictate what's correct for you. Your authority lets you know what's correct for you. Maybe I feel like dictate isn't that word for gate 2.
It's the creative director of your life.
Dictate, direct. Okay, director. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. It directs your life, takes you to where it is that you need to go. It moves the vehicle. If you fall into your design consciousness, your body consciousness, your body will naturally do what's correct. You don't have to force it. Sounds ridiculous and it sounds extremist, but it's radical strategy and authority. Your body will move you, and what's moving the body is the magnetic monopole. And so there's like this supreme force within us, this really intense magnet that pulls life towards us, that's in gate 2. And it's the essence of pure oneness and love and all that good stuff, except being in 3-dimensional human physical form, we are disconnected from that innate knowing. And so we don't recognize that we're all magical unicorns within these flesh suits, but we are, but we don't realize it. And we're forever in that illusion of separateness. But gene key 2 is like the ultimate feminine energy. And referring back to cosmology, when there was, the Big Bang, there's this idea that, we had these 2 main crystals that collided into one another, and then it created the essence of everything. If you think of like matter can't be destroyed or created, it's like all the matter that existed was tightly compacted in whatever form is appropriate for the science communities, but for the human design community, it's these 2 crystals, the band and the 2, very densely compacted, and then as it collided, it spread out very much like DNA. You have your DNA within an egg and a sperm, and then when they collide, it opens up to integrate with the other. Anyways, why am I talking about this? Oh, the 2 crystals one is perceivably feminine and one is perceivably masculine, or yin and yang. However, in the information that the voice gave raw, the two are feminine, the two are yin. There is no yang. It says that only light is yang, and that in and of itself is an illusion, and it's not. So just like everything is yin, everything is this second gene key, and we are, distorted in our perception of everything that it's not, but it is. Like, this is the heart of everything. So that's not much about the gene key. But anyways, dislocation, feeling disconnected from our path, letting the mind take control of like the drive of the vehicle, like trying to allow the mind to choose what is correct or incorrect, will you bring you to dislocation, because you're not going to be on the right path. You're not going to be on the right geometry. You're not going to be with the right people. You're not going to be in the right place at the right time. You're just disconnected, dislocated. I love this word that it's dislocation. If you think about time is location. Where you are time-wise in the present moment is just a physical spot in the universe. And then the next moment, oh, the earth rotated a tiny bit. Oh, the earth moved past the sun a tiny bit. Oh, the sun rotated around the galactic center a tiny bit. Like, it's just another location, another location. So if we think about divine timing in this sense, and we think, why aren't things happening faster? Why can't I have this now? It's because the earth is not in the physical right location for that to happen. When the earth moves to a different location, there is a different neutrino stream that's programming the earth, programming you, programming the people involved in whatever you want to have happen. And that needs to happen. And you can't go from point A to point B without going through the physical space it takes to get there in the space-time continuum from point A to point B. Like, you have to go through that movement. And so we get impatient. But anyways, I feel like this energy of dislocation is gold. But then we have the gift of orientation and the city of unity. But Sarah, you can take it away, because I did not prepare well enough for this, Chinky.
Well, it's funny because this is the one that I have everything underlined in, because I've read it so many times that I'm like, okay, where did I even, what was it for this week? But there's a bunch of different things, and I feel like I've reiterated this so many times, but again, to think about the lunar eclipse from this perspective, usually we only talk about the one key and the one gate, but this week we're talking about both, because we're giving you the full 360 perspective of everything, since it's so relevant. Something that I really like about this is just the idea that nothing ever happens outside of the order of the universe. So like, the only thing that differentiates whether or not something feels correct is the energetic or the perception that we bring to it. And so like, even if we're technically dislocated, the dislocation is still correct. It's already been orchestrated by the universal flow. The difference is that we don't feel correct, because it's kind of like a little signpost for us, like tapping us on the shoulder to make a different turn at the next place that we're at. It doesn't make the place that we're in any less correct. It's just kind of giving us the direction that maybe where we are right now, if we don't move forward in a slightly different direction, slightly to the left, slightly to the right, we're still going to remain in this specific energetic frequency. So it's never that anything is wrong or right. It's that our perception is wrong or right of it, and our energy thusly is affected by the way that our perception is. And so we can be correct being in the shadow, because everything is, again, divinely orchestrated. So there's never anything out of place. It's just a matter of how much suffering and how much control and how much of all of that stuff do we like bring to it. And so I felt like for me, like this is like the biggest lesson for me. It's because my ego is always like this. It's always thinking about duality. It's always judging things. It's always like, this is correct, this is incorrect. When in fact, like I could be acting in the shadow for 10 years and like that was correct. Like whatever way I went, it was correct. Am I subjectively going to experience it as correct? No. Absolutely not. But that doesn't mean that it's incorrect. And so there's a comfort there because there's a sense that we can get that we're missing out on something, or fearful that we're not doing things quickly enough, or whatever, we're wrong, right? We're wrong. We're out of alignment. Like, you fill in the blank on how you want to talk about it. But with the two, it's like, there is no wrong. There's vibrationally higher and vibrationally lower, and that's basically the only difference. So that was one thing that I felt like this was that was really important. He says that actions that come out of love have very different results than actions that come out of fear. And so it's like the age old quote, the only thing to fear is fear itself. That I've been really, really integrating into my system because I have a lot of fear. And it seems as though the fear itself is the problem and not the thing that I'm pointing at, right? The thing that I'm afraid will happen is not the problem. It's that I'm afraid in the first place, if that makes any sense. And so Richard Rudd goes on to say that the experience of being out of flow is actually a very useful experience, because you can't appreciate being in flow if you're not out of flow. And I feel like my whole life has been very much out of flow, even though, right, it was all divinely orchestrated and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Like, I was not enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying the ride. And so subjectively, it didn't really feel like, oh, I am in flow. This is flow. It felt like I was out of flow. And the reason it felt like I was out of flow was because eventually when I get into flow, there's a click, there's an alignment, there's a recognition, there's an enjoyment, there's a gratitude that you get when you get into flow. And so there's a usefulness for being out of it, even when it feels like just heinous and horrific and wrong in every sense of the word. This was the other thing that he said, you don't change anything through doing anything. It's a perceptual shift, right? So you're never going to be like, once I get here, once I do this way, once I do things that way, then I will be in, okay, thank you. Then I will be in, then everything that I want will come to me, basically. Like, that's not how it works. You have to change your perception. And sometimes when we material change our circumstances, it gives us the capacity to change our perception. So there's something to be said about that. But ultimately, the change comes from the perception. It's inside out, it's belief systems first, and then material reality second. We can start to change things in our material reality in order to give us the ability to hold the belief system that can really fully change us and change our energy. But we can't necessarily change our material reality. And that is the only way that we're going to feel the things that we want to feel. So there's that as well from this chapter. There's a couple other things I wanted to say. Again, this is where I'm like, what is what?
It's all so good. I forgot how good it was. It's all so good.
It is all so good. He says the feminine approach is all based on unity, surrender, and trust, which are all hallmarks of higher frequencies. And so all of the higher frequencies start in the two, or the two is where we'll really see them the most first. And then to talk about the repressive a little bit, there's this quality of repressive which is lost. And, I resonated with what he said around, you're lost when you're acting egoically out of harmony with your immediate environment. And so it's like the ego is like, I want this, but it's like, okay, but what is the environment, or what's correct for the environment around you and you? How can you be a part of a greater whole, right? How can you be in a state of unity with what's around you? Because you aren't going to be correct if you're out of alignment with your environment. And so you can want what you want, but if what you want is taking you and forcing you to be in this kind of contracted, constrained state and not in harmony with your environment, you're not going to feel aligned, you're not going to be in flow, and it's gonna be, I mean, unpleasant to say the least, but you're gonna feel lost. So there's that. And then the regimented nature, which is like the opposite, is like you have to do everything exactly this way. And this is what I was this is kind of what I was alluding to before. You have to do everything exactly this way in order to get in touch with the divine, in order to get in touch with your own divinity, right? But again, it's not a matter of what you do, it's a matter of the perception of what you do, the belief systems around what you do. And so just thinking about how regimented some people can be, because they're like, okay, if I meditate for 4 hours a day, like I'm going to be happy. Like, again, like maybe there are things that come from the meditation that increase your awareness, that increase your consciousness, that change your vibration, that leads you to feeling more in alignment. But it's not because you consistently were very square and very structured about it. It's the moments in meditation that increased your vibration. But that could have happened in 5 minutes, and that could have happened by you walking down the street. It didn't have to happen in meditation. And the more we cling on to the idea that it has to be a specific way, the further we get away from being in alignment, the further we get away from feeling located at the correct place at the correct time. So there's just this quality of needing to let go of the reins. Do you want to touch on the shadow at all, or do you want to piggyback on anything that I just said?
I'm just soaking it in. It's all so good. I feel like I have thoughts, but then I'm too actively listening to like give enough attention to my thoughts to orchestrate them for when it's my turn to talk. So just enjoying.
Okay.
Which is to give you a break, sorry, but
no. This is, I mean, obviously we're having an eclipse today, so
yeah. I feel like it's very relevant. I wanted to say relative. No, it's very relevant to all eclipses. Like there's this grand scheme that we're trying to take control of, and we're trying to be overly regimented in our lives. We can't be in the right place at the right time, which is like generally what eclipses are here to do, to like pick us up and pop us down where we need to be. So it's just like extreme eclipse energy right now, like just extreme, like to the square or like tenfold or I don't know how many times. It's just like extreme eclipse. So
it really is extreme eclipse energy,
especially if you have it on your ascendant, as Sarah does, or descendant, you know, on that
oh
axis.
my gosh, I know. And I'm like, this is, you know, if we think about, and I'll talk about it, well, I probably won't talk about it too much more, but we think about the descendant in terms of, you know, we think that the descendant is outside of us, that it's in someone else, but it's like the part that we most deeply need to integrate. And so it's funny because it's the two for me, but it's also in my numerology, I have the two all over the place, really. And so like this is one of my most challenging lessons, and also like one of the most structurally like important lessons, because nothing else can happen without getting this correct, or not correct without getting the perception correct. And so so I think that you know, this has just been such a really like fascinating and important time frame for me, with all of this energy activated, because I'm realizing what it is that needs to be integrated into myself, in a sense, in order to feel energetically more aligned with my own life. And I've been feeling the alignment start to click in a sense, being like, oh, okay, this is what these are the things, like everything that I've been clinging to, everything that I've been regimented about, everything that I have to do this. If I don't do it like this, then this is going to happen. All of those things, it's like, it's just fake. It's not real. And I could be, you know, someone who's reached a state of enlightenment, like washing the floors every day. You know, I don't have to do anything in particular. And I think that, you know, again, this is where, you know, the perception and the surrender just are such an important lesson, not just for me, but for everyone right now. Because the people that have this quality to them are incredibly infectious, and they have this, you can just, they just are like moving at the right place at the right time, you can sense that they just trust. They have this inherent trust in what the universe is doing. And no matter how much I logically trust what the universe is doing, I'm really attempting to integrate that into my physical body. So my body is also just in the state of divine surrender. So this is just very interesting and important for, I think, the eclipse season in general. I don't really have anything else to say, actually. So we can move on into the astrology.
So there's a sentence you just said, but I don't remember it. Go back and re-listen to what Sarah just said. It reminded me of Uranus being part of this eclipse. I was listening recently to Ernst Wilhelm and Kapil Raj Kara's channel on YouTube, like old videos, but they're talking about the outer planets from the Vedic astrology perspective, so Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and they say, like, don't, if you're doing the whole Vedic astrology thing, you don't use these for predictions in the person's chart, like, who are they going to marry, when are they going to get married, how many children are they have. But when it comes to like understanding them, they're important for transits and like how they affect us, not because of what's happening, but how it affects us as it happens. And so Uranus helps us become differentiated, unique beings. Like, human design came to us, we became 9-centered beings upon the discovery of Uranus. Human design is very Uranian in the sense that we're here for differentiation. We don't have to conform to the homogenization anymore. We don't have to fixate on survival. We can understand who we are and why we're here as unique individuals. And so it's about embracing your own uniqueness. And so I feel like this particular eclipse with this femininity, it's embracing surrendering to whatever is correct without the mind trying to control it to be yourself. It's like very just follow your strategy and authority in a nutshell, because that's going to lead you to your own correctness. That's going to lead you to the surrendering of not letting your mind be in charge. But it's just very pleasant in the Uranian sense, apart from like the detriment that I read earlier about Uranus, like not wanting to change direction again, like, oh, not again. We've already changed directions 3 times this week. I don't need to change anymore because it's the third line energy. But it's part of the trial and error energy of this eclipse is that, like, we're supposed to experience failure to a certain degree. Like Sarah said, you can be in your shadow, you can experience something that you deem incorrect. But just because it's incorrect, just because you deem it to be incorrect in your perspective of it is that it is incorrect, does not necessarily mean that it's wrong for you, because line 3s in particular, they're here to see failure. They're here to see what doesn't work so that they can change the system in a way that it does work. They're the movers and shakers of our world. And so this eclipse is a mover shaker energy, but also very feminine in its state of surrender. I have thoughts about Rahu and Ketu, which I shared on Facebook, but I can share here too, and I shared with Sarah. Do you want to say anything before I share?
I just want to actually, you can get into Rahu and Ketu after this, but I just want to read, there's a book called Predictive Astrology by Bernadette Brady, and I think that it's just useful to understand. There's this thing called Saros series, and I'm not as good as Lora at the technical stuff, but basically these eclipses happen within a series of time. So for example, this particular eclipse happened in between is going to happen between 1900 and 2050, and happened in 1914, 1932, 1950, 1968, 1986, 2004, 2022, and 2040. And so the last time it happened was in 2004. Interesting to think about the Saros series. And 2040 is the next time it's going to happen. And each of these eclipses in the Saros series has its own unique signature. And so for this particular signature, there's aspect between Pluto and Mars opposition, and there is a conjunction with Venus for the eclipse itself, and then sitting on the Uranus North Node midpoint. And she says this eclipse series is about being forceful and taking power. It has a manic flavor about it, with great force or strength manifesting in the relationship area. Individuals experiencing this Saros series may experience sudden events like falling in or out of love or sudden sexual encounters. The individual may also exert a huge effort in some group activity. And so there's just this quality of what feels like it's like there's this Uranian and scorpionic quality of like something breaking open. And what that thing is, I don't really think it needs to be in relationships. It can be in relationships. But having to do with power, having to do with our power, thinking about the one, thinking about how we use our power and where it's directed, if it's coming from the ego or if it's coming from the magnetic monopole. I think, yeah, I just wanted to read that, but I'd love for you to share some of your thoughts on the nodes.
I have to remember what they are. I've been exploring Rahu and Ketu more. I talked about, I feel like recently on this channel, I talked about their mythology and how it's questionable to label the planets as the good guys and the demon that became Rahu and Ketu when Vishnu severed his head after he drank the Amrit, the elixir of life. To label him as the bad guy, the Asuras as the bad guys, and the Devas as the good guys. And then again, Kapil Raj on YouTube. Hello, Kapil, if you're probably not listening to this. But I found videos of him talking about Rahu and Ketu, and he talks about this realization he had about the mythology and how it impacted his awareness of these two planetary beings, which they aren't. Right, that's another thing. If we're thinking about like the mechanics of stuff, we have neutrinos that come from the sun. Sorry to like repeat this boring lecture that I always have, but we have neutrinos that come from the sun. They are quantum particles. They have mass, and yet they are so small that they move through us, and so we are being physically impacted in our form, like our matter is being impacted by these quantum particles that also have matter, have mass, and that is how we are impacted by the astrology and the program. And so the sun emits 70% of our neutrinos, which is why we're mostly impacted by the sun's transits, which is why we go over the sun's transits every week. And yet Jupiter produces a small amount of neutrinos because it's a failed star. And the rest come from our neighboring stars that are, situated in this little neighborhood part of the galaxy. Train of thought. Oh, come on, we can reverse. We're not a bicycle. We can go backwards.
The nodes not being the bad
guys. Thank you. So the nodes are not planets. So we think of neutrinos just like light. Neutrinos move just a little bit slower than the speed of light. So we have speed of light from the sun, and like trailing right behind them are the neutrino stream. And so the light hits our neighborhood planets, just like the moon and Venus and Uranus, et cetera. And then the neutrino stream hits them right after, and then that light bounces back to us. And so we can see these planets in the night sky, and likewise, these neutrinos bounce right back us. And we impact the neutrinos just like Uranus is conditioning the neutrino stream before it comes to us. I'm conditioning the neutrino stream, Sarah's conditioning it, you're conditioning it before it goes back to Uranus. It's a co-creation of the program. In a nutshell, it's not, but it is. But anyways, again, North Node and South Node, they're calculated points, just like Black Moon Lilith. They are not actually planetary things. There's no matter there. If you think about mass, like your design crystal dictates your physical form because you are a physical form. Rahu and Ketu are not physical forms. They are positions in space. Therefore, the way they impact the neutrino stream is significantly different, and yet they're agents of the magnetic monopole, and they're what dictate your incarnation, your trajectory and geometry through life, the path you live, like whatever you experience that's based on the nodes. So they have this really intense significance. And anyways, if we go back to this mythology of, this is a long episode, sorry, because I'm going to try to keep it short, but we have this trajectory. No, we don't. What we do, we have this mythology of the North Node and South Node being the bad guys and therefore being malefic planets in our chart because, they're bad guys. They broke the rules. But if you go back and listen to recap, I won't recap, just go back and listen or find the mythology yourself. The sun and moon and all the quote unquote good guys, they were actually pretty naughty themselves and like weren't actually that great and should not be construed and viewed as like great and positive because they're not, and yet they get perceived that way. And then what Kapil said was that Vishnu knew what was happening the entire time because he is the all-powerful creative God. he is the one that's in charge of everything. So he knew, like the good guys were like, hey Vishnu, help us, we accidentally tricked the bad guys into like being here and we don't want them to be here anymore and we don't know what to do. And so Vishnu says, okay, I'll help you. And so he convinces the planets, the devas, that he's going to do what they want. However, Rahu Ketu, gets involved and creates a little mishap. But Vishnu knew what was happening. He knew that Rahu and Ketu would become immortalized, become powerful, just like the devas. He knew it all because he's in charge of it all. He's the all powerful, like creative God. And so there's this idea of like, ugh, Rahu and Ketu, they became bad and now they shouldn't be here. Now they're going to haunt the sun and the moon in the form of eclipses for world without end, yada, yada. And yet, like, it was supposed to happen, right? It was supposed to, oops. Can you see me still? No, I don't think you can see me anymore. I can't hear you.
I can see you, but you're frozen.
Oh no.
I would turn your video off and turn it back on.
Yeah, let me see.
Sorry, technical difficulties, everyone. Okay, now you're gone.
Well, maybe my camera ran out of battery.
Oh yeah, your camera definitely ran out of battery. So you're gonna have to talk.
I can change my camera. Hold on. I can.
Well, I just want to say something while you're doing that really quick. So, and we are going to start to wrap up here, everyone. So thank you for sticking around for all of our eclipse technical difficulties, right-mindedness, and the like. But what I do want to say is that, ancients traditionally thought of the North and South Node and the eclipses as they were afraid of them. I've said this before in past episodes. They were considered malefic, like Laura was just sharing. And I had this kind of watershed moment around them because essentially I think that they really aren't malefic because again, like we were just talking about in the two, it's a matter of perception and what the nodes can do. There's this cross aspect that's happening between the sun and the moon. And what they can do is they can basically ground us deeper into the Maya or into the illusion of materiality. And that maybe not feels bad depending on our perception. But if we can sit back and take on passenger consciousness, it may not actually feel bad. We may be able to just see it for what it is. Ra said, like I believe Laura mentioned, that we're not here to basically, like, human design's here to break the system, but it's not here to break the system because there's going to be a revolution of our lives. There's going to be a revolution of our consciousness and our attachment to being the ego's attachment to being the driver of our lives. And so the eclipses may give our ego a run for their money in a sense, which doesn't feel necessarily good. But if we're looking at it from the perspective of we're going to be the passenger, we're going to watch the movie, we're not going to be attached to the outcome, we're going to go with the flow, it becomes a lot less painful. Our energy is different, the perception's different, and our vibration that we're meeting everything with is different. So I just wanted to mention that as we had our little camera situation. Laura, I'm sorry to have had that happen in the middle of your monologue, but
it's okay.
go ahead.
It means that we have to keep it under an hour if I want to use my nice camera, but otherwise I have this camera. But I forgot my monologue. Rahu Ketu. I mean, like you said, like they're not necessarily negative agents because they're grounding us in our trajectory. They're grounding us in this path of the magnetic monopole. But yeah, I forgot essentially. Yeah, Rahu Ketu. Vishnu, what was going on? Like it was planned, it was orchestrated, and they're not actually that bad. So if you're looking at your chart and you're questioning your North Node and South Node placements, maybe look at them with a different light. Maybe see them as how they're helping you rather than hindering you. But in terms of eclipses, like Sarah also had this idea of people who are born on eclipses, there's less choice. We often say there's like no choice with what or we have, no choice, but the perception of having a choice might be lessened if we were born on an eclipse. But Sarah can probably explain that better than I, but you don't have to. We can wait to the next podcast, because it's been a long episode for y'all.
It's been a long episode. It's been a funny episode. There's been a lot going on over here. But yeah, I think that, as Laura just said, the people that I've seen who are born on eclipses tend to have what seems like more fated lives. In a sense, they have less choice to get further away from their magnetic monopole or their correct course, in a sense. And so it's interesting to note, if you know anyone who have eclipses just in their chart where they were born under, just kind of see like what the quality of their lives are. But I think that I don't have anything else I wanted to share on the eclipses. We have had very much talk about between the 1 and the 2 from Human Design and Gene Keys, and we've talked so much about the eclipses this past couple of weeks because we've been in eclipse season. I will just say that we're going to have an eclipse at the end of April and middle of May that are going to be, one of them will be at 30 degrees of Aries and the other one's going to be in Scorpio. And so we have like a halfie. The nodes will still be in Taurus and Scorpio then, but like we're getting one half of this eclipse in the sign of Scorpio, and we can talk more about that obviously when the time comes. But other than that, this is the end of eclipse season. Obviously the energy reverberates. The energy is not just gone, doesn't just poof. It's a process oriented thing. It's a flowering. But I would just pay attention to what's been flowering for you over these past few weeks and what kind of insights and universal requests to let go have been coming up for you. And again, thank you guys so much for sticking around. Laura, do you want to add anything?
No, I think we're okay. We'll let y'all go.
Okay, perfect. Well, again, thank you guys for being here. If you like our content, if you like our channel, if you like Human Design, the Gene Keys, astrology, and potentially some other divinatory systems, depending on what comes out of us, then please subscribe, share with your people if you think that they're also on our fractal. And yeah, let us know if you would like any types of readings. We're both open for them, and we would love to connect. So thank you so much. Happy eclipsing, as Laura said last time, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Happy eclipsing. Goodbye.